A local photographer captures an image so bizarre that it goes viral overnight. No one can believe that the picture is real, but it is, and the photographer can only watch as his picture shocks the whole world. Darren Koontz gripped his camera as thunder cracked overhead, louder and closer than he'd ever heard. His pulse raced as he stood alone on the open plain, watching a monstrous cloud churn and swell like a dark tidal wave poised to crash. He could feel the storm's pulse, heavy and ominous, echoing in his chest. Raindrops began to pelt his face, sharp and cold, but he didn't flinch. He steadied himself, angled his lens, and snapped the shot just as lightning lit up the roiling mass. The cloud took on the terrifying shape of a nuclear blast, a ghostly specter over Lubbock. In that instant, Darren knew he'd captured something that would shake the town to its core, the type of photo he'd been dreaming of taking for a long time. Darren Koontz had spent a lifetime capturing the vast Texan landscape. Known as Lubbock's Eyes by locals, he was a beloved photographer but felt like his work had yet to make a real impact. Darren dreamed of taking a shot that would captivate and resonate, perhaps more widely than the friendly streets of Lubbock. For years he thought that would be a quiet sunrise, a brilliant sunset, or a rare view of the state's rolling plains. But on April 11th, he was given something entirely different, something so shocking no one would have believed this. That day, Darren noticed something odd in the sky while preparing to go home after another day of freelance work. Dark, churning clouds began forming on the horizon, a sight that often meant a Texas thunderstorm but looked more intense, as if the sky itself was swelling with tension. He debated ignoring it, but the sheer force of the gathering storm pulled him in. Grabbing his camera, he set off, chasing the clouds as they moved closer. He felt that strange, pressing urgency that seasoned photographers know well, a feeling that something rare and powerful was about to happen, something that was both thrilling and terrifying. As Darren steadied his camera, an unusual feeling washed over him, a mix of exhilaration and dread. The storm wasn't just a sight to capture, it was something fierce, alive, and merciless, challenging him to look deeper. He felt the weight of the moment press on him, filling the air with a raw energy that pulsed around him like a heartbeat. The clouds towered high, twisting into an unnatural shape, and he felt as if he was staring into the eye of something far more powerful than he could comprehend. Every instinct told him to get to safety, but he couldn't tear himself away. As the first drops of rain began to hit his skin, Darren's mind raced. This photo could be his masterpiece, the one that might finally give his work the impact he'd been chasing for years. Yet, mixed with that hope was a gnawing fear, an awareness that he was capturing something that could strike panic and awe in equal measure. He thought of the quiet beauty he usually sought in his photography, and how this moment was so different, raw, and unfiltered. For a split second, he questioned if he was meant to capture something so stark, so apocalyptic. He closed his eyes for a beat, centering himself. When he opened them, he felt his fingers steady as he clicked the shutter, sealing the image in his camera. But as he looked up again at the storm, he felt a pang of uncertainty. Would people see the strength and beauty of nature in his photo? Or would they only see the threat, the chaos? He knew this photo was the one he'd been searching for, but he couldn't shake the sense that it came with a price, an uneasy awareness of the fine line between awe and fear. The storm wasn't moving as much as it was expanding, filling the horizon in an eerie, slow-motion explosion. Darren barely registered the cold sweat forming on his forehead as he began shooting, snapping one photo after another as the light dimmed and the first raindrops fell. Finally, he captured the shot, the one that, even through his viewfinder, felt like it was something he would remember for a lifetime. By the next morning, Darren's photo had taken on a life of its own. What had begun as a single post on his photography page quickly spiraled into something far larger than he could have anticipated. First, it was the locals who shared it, their captions ranging from awe-filled to fearful, some adding ominous tags like #doomsdaycloud and #endofdays. Within hours, news outlets from nearby cities picked up the image, drawn to its rare, unsettling beauty and the eerie resemblance to a nuclear blast. Soon, it had leaped across the state's borders, landing in digital news feeds and papers as far away as New York and California. The comparisons were inevitable. In comment sections and social media threads, reactions poured in. "Looks like the end of the world," one user wrote, while another said, "This is what it must have looked like over Hiroshima." Words like apocalyptic, terrifying, and haunting surfaced over and over, and speculation ran wild. Some thought it might signal climate change had gone too far. Others saw it as a warning or an omen, and conspiracy theorists claimed it was proof of government experiments gone wrong. It seemed everyone had their own story for what the photo meant, each one grander and more intense than the last. As he scrolled through the comments, Darren felt a strange, conflicted pride. His photo was finally reaching people, touching something deep in them. But the intensity of the reactions was more than he'd anticipated. He'd never meant to stir panic or sensationalism. He'd simply wanted to share the raw, unfiltered power of that moment. Yet as he read comment after comment, he began to wonder if his photo had become something beyond his control. It wasn't just an image of a storm anymore. It was a symbol, a canvas, on which people projected their fears, anxieties, and wonder. When national news channels began requesting interviews, Darren hesitated. How could he explain that, to him, the storm was as much about nature's beauty as it was about its terror? As he watched his photo take on new meanings he'd never intended, he felt both exhilarated and uneasy. The world had seen what he'd seen that day on the open plain, but now it seemed they were seeing even more than he'd bargained for. Darren received messages from meteorologists, storm chasers, and even government agencies. Some praised him for his timing, calling the photo a masterpiece of nature's raw power. Others were unnerved by its implications, reminded of the very real risks of powerful storms, of climate change, and of nature's increasingly unpredictable moods. The local news framed it as a shocking look at nature's might, sparking conversations about Texas weather patterns and the fear of more extreme weather events. But to Darren, the photo wasn't political or cautionary. It was simply nature in all its brutal beauty. He thought the conversations around it might die down after a few days, but they only grew louder. Not everyone was pleased. Some in Lubbock accused Darren of glorifying the dangers of storms and of romanticizing the destructive power that had, in recent years, become a very real threat to the region. Local activists raised concerns about the increasing frequency of such storms and the need for better infrastructure to protect against them. Caught in the middle, Darren wasn't sure how to respond. To him, it was simply a photograph, but he realized it had become a symbol for something larger than he intended. Nature's force had always inspired him, but the conversation now highlighted both its danger and humanity's role in its changing temperament. The public reaction eventually led to a town hall meeting. Local officials invited Darren to share his experience, hoping his perspective would shed light on what so many felt when they saw the photo. Darren arrived with mixed emotions, feeling the weight of his unintended influence. When he spoke, Darren described the awe and fear he'd felt, his respect for the sheer scale of nature, and how he hoped his work might bring the community closer to understanding, rather than fearing the world around them. His honesty resonated with the audience, and as he spoke, he realized that capturing the image was indeed more significant than he'd realized. It had sparked a much-needed conversation about community resilience and adaptation in the face of nature's evolving challenges. As weeks passed, Darren's photo continued to circulate, taking on a life of its own. The community's debates transformed into practical action: emergency drills, storm preparation workshops, and better funding for weather alert systems. His once feared image had inspired a proactive spirit in Lubbock. Darren finally felt he'd achieved what he'd hoped for. Not just by capturing a breathtaking shot, but by showing people the dual nature of beauty and danger in their world. The storm had come and gone, but its impact would linger, as would Darren's photo, an eternal reminder of the power and fragility of the place they called home. If you saw this picture, what would you think had happened? Share in the comments section below. Thank you for watching. See you in the next one.